Clients ask me, well, why aren't there so many changes in this budget? We forget that we had a lot of changes from budget 2002, 2003, 2004. So what the minister is trying to do now is to fine-tune whatever he has introduced over the last 6 or 7 years. So we have made a lot of changes. And right now, it is just fine-tuning. And as regards the productivity and innovation emphasis, I remember like over 20 years ago, we have this National Productivity Board. What happened to it? Why suddenly it died and then now it gets resurrected? So I think that's something we should pose to the minister. What happened to the national productivity effort we championed 20 years ago? So I think what we introduce, we have to push forward rather than instead of because I remember at that time, we were looking at local companies, helping them becoming more productive. And then we emphasize on MNCs. MNCs is important, but then what we need to do is to grow our local industries. So I certainly hope that we can have more effort put into SMEs and also, for that matter, our small firms. What can the minister do to make us more competitive? Because if they change the legislation and say, well, if you're a company with less than 10 million, no need to audit, then a few of my friends will have to merge. Maybe that's why they came up with M&A allowance.
Yeah, Yee Loong, you had a lot of questions for the minister, but I don't think it's in the audience today. PK Basu, I got your message that the finance ministry has actually exceeded its KPI, because last year they were budgeting for a deficit, they made a surplus, right? So that's I hope someone can get a message to the finance ministry and probably ask a question on behalf of Yee Loong.
Well, because they met the KPI, that's why you notice that hidden in the budget, there's 8% increase for the parliamentarians and ministers.
There you go.
It was hidden in one of the budget requirements.
And the thing about why did the productivity movement going out of fashion and coming, could it be related to the length of the miniskirt? You know, when there's a recession, it goes up, and there's depression, it goes down. Maybe it's one of those fashion things. Now, let's turn to the audience. Are there any questions that you would like to put to this distinguished panel of speakers here? I think we are more a bit warmed up. We have got some opinions from the panelists. Are there any particular specific questions about the economy, about what the EDB can do for you? What about the professor? Does he have any views and ideas? Anybody? Please, when you ask the question, please identify yourself and your organization as well. There are, I think, about 4 to 6 microphones around the aisles. Do we have the first taker? A series of questions here, most of which PK Basu has already answered. But, some Yee Loong says that some Yee Loong says that this year is an election budget. But some people don't think it is an election budget because there are not many giveaways this year. There's also a definition for a normal budget. And a normal budget is the government gives with one hand and takes back with the other hand, right? Some people have said that this is a transformational budget, which is really a concerted set of incentives to really transform the economy, to bring it at a higher level. Question for PK Basu, what are the implications and the impact of the budget to businesses in general?
Well, I think, of course, the most obvious implication is that you need to focus on a couple of things. First, productivity and innovation, of course. The definition of productivity and innovation is those 7 criteria. If you spend on those items, you get a substantial incentive. So I think that's probably the single biggest benefit to the business sector. And then, of course, there's also the incentive for M&As. Now, what is interesting about both the PIC as well as the M&A incentive is that it is actually targeted to SMEs. So I think Sami is probably being a little harsh on the minister this time, because they actually, if anything, this year's budget does have some fairly targeted incentives that benefit smaller businesses more than large ones. There is a substantially larger, I think with the M&A incentive, for instance, it is in fact targeted to smaller businesses, aimed at enabling them to bulk up and become large enough so that they can eventually use that bulk to compete overseas. So to that extent, I think that there are in fact some quite positive things in this budget, which is quite unusual relative to the past, where there's a lot of targeted things that will benefit the small and medium enterprises.
Right. Thank you, Basu. There are some. Okay, please. You need to answer. You need to respond to that.
Well, no. I think Basu is correct to say that the PIC actually, if you look at it, is aimed at SME because of a 300,000, 250% deduction. And if you look at the large multinationals, when they come in, they don't really want the 250% deduction because when they come in, they are investing huge amounts, and most of the times, and Anna will confirm this, they will get pioneer incentive. So they get 10-year exemption. So for them, they are not interested in the 250%, right? So that is correct. They are looking at the SME, but my question really is it good that we emphasize that we must be very big? I remember the times when we have smallish banks, Tattli Bank and Keppel Bank, and my clients were very happy because the SMEs, they were being financed and attention were given to them by Tattli Bank, by Keppel Bank, and suddenly they disappeared and they talked to DBS, they said, you're too small, we're not interested. So my question is it necessary that everyone must be very big? I'm not very big, but I'm quite happy with myself.
Yeah, I think that round of applause shows that Yee Loong is a pretty big thinker at least, right? So we were talking about SMEs and Basu said that the budget this year is targeted toward SMEs and the PIC, the Productivity and Innovation Credit, is really to encourage them to boost their productivity and grow and so on. Now, how useful in your experience, maybe I direct this question to Anna, how useful would this PIC be to MNCs who will need to actually invest a certain amount of resources first? You need to invest in upgrading your processes to upgrade your, automate your production floor and what have you. How useful would this be to the SMEs?
I would say that the PIC is applicable to all. Of course, from a small company perspective, the quantum is significant and the value would be there. I mean, for companies that have been in Singapore for a long time and they are in tax paying, whether they're big or small, I think the PIC incentive does help them. That's why I say that you need to be quite deliberate in looking at certain of the activities to try to make use of the incentives that's been announced this year. But of course, for new companies that come into Singapore, there's a slew of other tax incentives around. I think that the budget proposals in terms of the announcement this year, I think we should know that there are many other tax measures that still exist in the Income Tax Act or the Economic Expansion Incentives Act. So I think it's complementary. I think the PIC, in a way, gives a boost to productivity. It sends a signal as to what we want to see in Singapore. I thought that is very useful. So it is a start. If companies put in the first bite of the activities, they may hit the 300,000, and thereafter, if there's more activities, depending on the kind of scope the company is doing, there are actually other incentives around that companies can actually look towards various agencies to apply to for the incentives.